Let's welcome on stage Joshua, Jake and Alex.
Right, how are we doing? I hope everyone's doing well. So, I put a post up the other day, and it was my stage shots, like comparison from last year, 10 months ago at the NFM, in comparison to this year, just gone. As I'm filming, it was 6 days ago at the PCA, and I am currently around £21 up from last year, which is, in all fairness, quite good, quite impressive. And I've had a decent bit of feedback from that post and some other posts. So what I thought I'd do is actually film a useful video for people, in the sense of what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through my just gone off season and run through what I did well, what basically everything I did. And that's not in a sense of I'm amazing, this is brilliant, this is fantastic, follow me, etc. But it's more so a case of hopefully people can take things away from it. And it's going to be something which is quite useful for people taking into their off seasons if they're following a prep or a rebound or whatever that really sort of is. So, okay, so here we go. I've made some notes. Thankfully, is this going to fucking focus? There we go. We on. Thankfully, Loom allows you to make notes which doesn't show on the screen, so I can actually remember what I need to run through. So this was the back end of prep. This was the last day of prep. This was the NFM show where I placed first in a class of 1. So technically, I am a European champion bodybuilder. Technically. But no. So this was day 1 of the off season, technically day 1 of the rebound. And hopefully this is going to load. Here we go. Post-prep update. Here we go. So yeah, food was 650 carb on a training day, 60 grams of fat, 250 protein. If I was having an off plan, that would, I could have an off plan whenever I wanted. It would be 4 meals. So the first 3 meals would consist of 400 grams of carbohydrates, obviously collectively, 30 to 40 grams of fat, and then about 150 grams of protein with the off plan meal on top. 10k steps. Non-training day, same sort of procedure. 400 carb. My first meal would always be pro fat, and then 90 fat, 250 protein. If having off plan, it would be 200 carb, 45 to 55 fat, and 150 grams of protein, and then 12k of steps. Now, when it comes to cardio, this is something we kept in for the whole of the off season. It actually went to, it was 25 minutes, 5 times per week. That then became still 5 times a week, but it was 2 times. It was every single rest day I would have 30 minutes. So however much that would come up to, because I had a different sort of training plan. Let's say it was twice a week. I would then 3 times a week on my training days do 25 minutes. So it'd be 30 minutes on a rest day, 25 minutes on a training day. And it was a sense where I just needed to grow. Obviously on screen you'll have some photos, and to be fair, I've got some photos ready to overlay, but I probably won't need to, so it should be absolutely fine. And then when it comes to anabolics, all we were running after prep was 200 milligrams of test and 100 milligrams of mast, simply just because we needed to rebound. And at this point in time, I was just training whatever I wanted, which actually turned out to be the exact same training split, which I ended up running. So that's quite funny, because I was literally just jumping in with people for sessions. So if it was a case where I was jumping in with Ethan or Zena or Ed or John, it was a case where I just wanted to be training with people. So this is essentially running through. This was like the first or second session back. I think the first session I did back was a day post prep, and I immediately threw in a dumbbell press. Horrendous idea. So this was the first session back at Planet, where I had pull. And I was incredibly weak. Incredibly. I think it's like 160 kilos. Yeah. Not enjoyable. Thankfully, I did progress this by 100 kilos during my off season, so that's quite nice. But yeah, that was essentially the first session back. What I'll probably do is just actually scroll through these. That makes a whole lot more sense. Until we get to the 7th of November, which is technically when my off season actually not started, but that's when I had a new sort of training plan, an actual training plan, I should say. This was lower, which I definitely needed. Adductors, absolutely horrendous. Prep 2023 wrap up, still a bit meh. Just look a bit shit, don't I? Jesus Christ. It's my posing routine, which was to intro XX, which is an absolute bang, I will say. We then go into, I believe this actually might be, this is basically the start of, not an off season, but it's almost like the, when my sort of new training split went in. So I also should note, when I started my rebound, I was about 83 kilos. I don't really know how, considering the bottom end of prep, I was like 74. Basically, the back end of my prep, if anyone would have sort of followed, was an absolute shit show. Between shows, I gained like 9 kilos of water through digestive issues, and I legitimately ate around 5,000 calories in about 3,000 calories in about 5 days. So yeah, that wasn't ideal. So bodyweight we weren't really paying too much attention to. It was more so just a case of the visuals and trying to get them to improve as much as they possibly could. So 2 weeks post prep, no changes to literally anything at all, aside from the fact that my new training split had gone in. So that was push, pull, rest, legs, rest. So it was a 5-day split, which rotated consistently. No, 3-day split across 5 days. So it wasn't the case where I was training the exact same session every single day of every single week. It was more so a case of running the exact same sessions and just getting really good at them, because I was doing the same push session, the same exercises, the same rep range, literally the exact same session every 5 days. It's very monotonous, but I do think it worked really, really well for me, because I just got used to these movements and I got pretty strong at them pretty quickly. So at this point, my body weight was 86.4. So I gained 3 kilos by this point. And the rate of gain was, in my head, it was quite quick. Like, I felt like it was going like a kilo or so per week, but in reality, like, it really wasn't, to be honest. Like, it was a decent sort of rate of gain where my training was getting really, really good already. Like we'd see here, this is back onto the Cybex hack, and even on like the leg press, for example, 3 rotations in, and it was like the first, I think it was like 3 rotations in of lower, but it was the first time I'd been back on the squat press, and I was already getting like 8 plates for 15 as a top set. So I did my back off set at 10 plates for 7, and that was already like a decent amount more load that I was using it like towards the back end of prep, start of this sort of off season. So strength levels were definitely increasing pretty quickly, and it was good that the food which I was having, the heightened amount of food, my food was at like say 4,000 calories straight away, was being utilized really, really well. And that's something which I would say to people towards like when you're coming out of a prep and you're going into an off season, get your baseline food nice and high, not nice and high, but high to the point where you can just allow your training to progress, because that's something which I see a lot of the time is people will, let's say, try to reverse diet as perfectly as they possibly can be, and their training isn't in a good position for 4, 5, 6 months. Whereas, yes, okay, if you can just accept the fact that you're going to put on a bit of body fat, you're going to do so regardless. Just allowing yourself to just get your training into a good position is going to be systemically significantly better, I should say. Significantly better. So we're going to fast forward now towards the start of the year, where we actually kick-started the off-season, which I'll get to hopefully in a minute, unless there's anything significant which I want to cover. Not really, if you can tell there's a pause. I needed a wee. Third rotation of pull, already 10 kilos up again on the stiff leg deadlift. I'm pretty sure this is now up to 190, I want to say. Back up to 200 already. So again, like, strength levels is definitely getting better quite significantly. Legs, is any visuals here? No. I remember that this session was getting pretty brutal. I was already back up to like 10 plates for a set of 7, 8 plates for a set of 13 on the hammer strength leg press. And then the pendulum squat, initially I had first, but I quite liked it as like my third compound in a sense. Well, technically my second, but my third set where I had a little bit of a pause, and it was absolutely brutal. 2.5 plates, but it got a lot better. But it was definitely hard, but also pretty damn fun. This is another check-in of me. Literally just a case of holding these visuals. My notes are at the bottom, so I can't see. 23rd November, so still got another about 5 weeks before the off season actually started. Can't say Black Friday, lovely stuff. Pull up the hashtag Mecca. Operation Classic / BB, still the operation. Already now back up to 225. So again, strength levels definitely getting there. Still not like peak levels of strength, but definitely getting where they should be. This is a nice side-by-side comparison of 91 kilos or 200 pounds, which is quite silly considering where I'm at now. And again, it's a case of just doing the do and following the sort of plan. Because this is literally within a case of, this was a few weeks into prep, I'm pretty sure, of last year. Then this is literally just a few weeks into reversal, which is quite silly. Again, push 230, legs, and we should be getting soon. I'm going to try and fast forward. Here we go. So this was like an update reel where this was actually when we kick-started the off season. So right now my body weight is at cheers Pat, Josh Jenkins fat bastard season. Cheers buddy. 94.3 kilos, and PDs had their first increment. So we went to 350 milligrams of test, 450 milligrams of mass, so what's that? 800 milligrams total load. And then we also introduced 59 IUs of Lantus with my first meal on a training day, so long-acting insulin, and then also 250 milligrams of L-carnitine on weaker body part days. So that would be legs and push for myself. So that was the first actual kickstart of PDs. Food still hadn't been jumped up because we didn't need to, and that's again something I'll say to people all the time, is that if your training is progressing, do you really, really need to have more food? No, you don't. The first food jump up is on the 11th of Jan, so I'll try and fast forward to that now, when we've actually got some check-in photos. There we go, bosh. So my body weight is actually down to 94 kilos at this point. So 60 grams of carbohydrates got added in onto training days, bringing the total carb intake to 710 grams, which will actually go through how I sort of situated that. So what I have on screen to my left or my right, depending on where I can be asked to put this, is actually my whole training day nutrition at this point. So it was 2 eggs, 160 grams of egg whites. I don't know why it was 160. I probably should have just done 150 because I'm fucking lazy. But I'm also quite monotonous sometimes, so it was 160. And then also 2 tortilla wraps. Pre-workout meal was 125 grams of cream of rice, 50 grams of whey, 20 grams of dark chocolate, 1 squares bar, 2 crumpets, and 25 grams of jam. Intra-workout was 20 grams of carb drive, 15 grams of EEA, so essential gains, and then post-workout was 235 grams of Frosty. You just have 250, you stupid idiot. And then 50 grams of whey. And then our meal 4 was 150 grams of chicken, 1 packet of rice, so basmati rice, 150 grams of veg, which I think was like baby corn and broccoli, I'm pretty sure, and then 2 tortilla wraps as well. Again, really easy source of carbohydrates at this point where my appetite actually wasn't sky high, believe it or not. And then meal 5 was 100 grams of chicken, 2 bagels, and 20 grams of dark chocolate. We then fast forward to the 25th of January. We had another food bump up. So I'll try and fast forward to that now. As you can see, like visuals are significantly improving. By this point, I'd already added in a incline barbell press, which actually got on with quite well. When I'm in an off season, I do like a barbell press. I think it fits me quite well. And that's something which I do think post prep, I'm not going to throw it in straight away, but I wouldn't mind running this up and trying to get towards 160, 180 kilos. I think the most I ever got on this was like 140 for a set of like 3 or 4 or 5. But I definitely wouldn't mind running that up because it's definitely a movement which I do enjoy. And that's again something which I think doing movements which you enjoy is massively important when you are within any sort of phase really, but especially in off season. Do you have to be the most optimal in the world? No. But as long as you're having fun, that's the main thing. As you can see here, 240 kilos for 3. Is that going to build me a load of muscle? No, but then when I'm doing a back offset, is that going to be more productive? Probably, because that load is going to feel significantly lighter. We then go to, again, this was no changes. I think it was the next week where we had some changes, which was 25th of January. Bosh! So, train day food increased to 760 carb, 60 fat, and 270 protein, roughly 4,700 calories. Which was... Did I go through? Yeah, the changes I made was added a wrap to my meal 1. Frosty's post-workout went to 250 from 235, then I also added in 20 grams of honey, and then meal 5 for the additional protein, I added 50 grams of chicken. And then when it comes to PDs, I think I touched upon this, there was also a SUPS increase. Yes, PDs and Lantus. So test went up to 400 milligrams and mass went up to 600 milligrams. So now running a gram of gear. And then Lantus went up an additional 5 IUs, so 20 IUs of Lantus with my first meal. Aside from that, that was only changes because my body was actually down at this point. We then fast forward to the back end of Feb, which is when the next food increase was. Again, squat press. I'm not breaking my back as much as I do now, so clearly I don't want it enough. I'm not even lifting my heels up. I'm an absolute pussy. Session with Sam. Match best on 220, and then also my best on 200. Lovely stuff. Where are we now? 9th of Feb. Got a little bit of fast forwarding to do. If you wonder why I'm just scrolling for no reason, it's because I can't see the dates. 21st will be probably the next check-in, I'm pretty sure. Big session with Reese. This is a different, it's technically the same squat pattern, but I did this pause now. Just get a bit more out of it. Here we go. So bodyweight plateauing over the last week or so, so a touch more food adding in on train days and non-train days. Bringing my totals to 800 carb on a train day, 60 fat, 285 protein, which I situated as there was no changes to the wraps, but I added in 500 ml of orange juice, so just again, easy sources of carbohydrates, simply because I didn't have much of an appetite at this point. I also changed up my pre-workout meal so that it was now 1 packet of sticky rice, which I will mention. If you're within an off-season or a gaining phase or whatever you want to really call it, and you are struggling to get in food, go for jasmine rice, go for sticky rice, go for sushi rice, whatever it's called. It's so much nicer than basmati, and it's also going to be higher in carbohydrates as well. So that's a little easy sort. I think a packet of rice is like 95 carb as opposed to like 70 from basmati, and the volume of it is so much lesser as well. But I found that cream of rice wasn't digesting as well, so I went for 150 grams of chicken, 1 packet of sticky rice, 20 grams of dark chocolate, 1 squares bar, 2 crumpets, 25 grams of jam. Into workout, I worked up to 30 grams of carbohydrates through Carb Drive, then also 15 grams of EAs through Essential Gains. Post-workout was exactly the same, 250 Frosties, 50 whey, 20 grams of honey. Meal 4 was now no veg because my appetite was in the bin. I actually pulled out the wraps as well, so that was 200 grams of chicken, 1 packet of sticky rice, 10 grams of dark chocolate, and then meal 5 was 175 grams of chicken, 2 bagels, 10 grams of dark chocolate. So that brings my totals to the 800 carb, 60 fat, 285 protein. And then on our non-train day, we added in an additional bit of protein and then also an additional bit of carbohydrate. So by this point, my appetite was genuinely not the best because my first meal was 60 grams of whey, 40 grams of dark chocolate and 250 grams of orange juice. I could have easily just had like a very low volume cream of rice meal or something like that. Meal 2, 175 grams of chicken, 1 packet of basmati rice. So again, I'm trying to be careful of my appetite because I'm trying to preserve the sticky rice for when my appetite is a lot lesser. So 1 packet of basmati rice and 10 mils of olive oil. Meal 3 and meal 4 were exactly the same, which is 50 grams of whey, 130 grams of oats, 10 grams of dark chocolate, 100 grams of fruit. Then my last meal was quite similar to a train day in the sense of it was 175 grams of chicken, 2 bagels, and 20 grams of dark chocolate. We then fast forward, if we can, to the 7th of March, which was, this was on the 5th, so it's probably the next check-in. Here we go. Finally saw a weigh-in above 98 kilos for a day, and then I got ill, so I'm back at sub 97. Sick. Volume went up at this point. Still running the exact same training split, but we also had a bump up of PDs in the sense of an extra 150 milligrams of Mastron, and that was all we did in this check-in. I think it's all that really changed for the next month or so. So we ran the exact same training split for the next month, which was absolutely sound. Another session at Ultraflex Derby. Session at the shed. And then best pulls off the floor, so 255 and 220. Never done a set on 255 before this, so it was quite cool. Execution wasn't the best, but again, that's why I say, like, expose yourself to a great amount of load, because I then had the best set I ever had on 220 kilos. I think I got this for 9, and I wanted 10, which is a bit annoying. And I think, again, I was playing around with the idea of going into this fresh. But at this point, like, I always find within hip hinging is that if I go in and I'm always a bit fatigued, because I've got used to that pattern in that session, I can probably get a bit more out of it. So I kept running 220 for the back off set, and I think I might have got 10. I'm not too sure. No changes at all. I was at 98.8 kilos at this point. And is this the update? No. Ideal plans for this year is essentially to grow as much as possible. That went well. Well, I did grow well, but I'm now 8 days out. Oops. We then had another comparison, same body weight. This is quite cool. So this was my post-prep rebound so far. Bosh, fat bastard, but added a decent bit of tissue. And there we go. This is when I started reverting back to a 7-day training split, which was pull, push, lower, which are the exact same sessions which I was running before. However, I then put my hip hinge from pull into my second lower session, because essentially I found that when I was doing that hip hinge in pull, I was almost just getting a little bit too sort of obsessed with it. And that's something which I see a lot of the time is you go into a session, for example, you go into pull, and you think the hip hinge is the only important thing. And that's something I've done in the past as well. So I'll put too much pressure on that set to progress. And then sometimes I'll maybe take a rep I shouldn't do and I'll still progress it. But then it might get to a point where it's then taken away from my pull downs, my rows, which I actually still want to be progressing, believe it or not. So the transition to a pull, push, lower, rest, upper, lower, rest split. So pull, push legs were the same. And then the upper session, we ran with 3 presses and 3 pulls. There was a lot more volume within that upper session than I was usually doing. So we had 2 sets on each press, 3 sets on each pull. There was a lateral raise to start, 1 bicep, 1 tricep movement with both 3 sets, and then a lateral to finish with a fair bit of sort of metabolic work. So a lot of volume within that session. It was taking me an easy good 3 hours each time. But I could recover. Like, I was having a decent bit of food. PDs were, I think at this point, like a peak dose. So therefore, I could recover from it. And it was a case where at this point, I liked being in the gym. So I didn't really mind too much. Lower B was obviously with the hip hinge that was removed from pull. We then fast forward to May the 2nd. At this point, 99 kilos. Lovely stuff. Another session at Ultraflex Derby. Full lower B session. Again, like, you can fairly... I thought you were prepping this year. Oops. Yeah, obviously, I got a fair few reels breaking down my sessions. So if you want to run through my Instagram, feel free. In terms of how I did things, we now had a T-bar row, because I on pull, I took out one of the row movements. And was this pull? Yeah, this was pull. So I took out one of the row movements, like the chest supported rows, and I still wanted a little bit of a rep to work in here. So I did a non chest supported T bar, which was actually really, really fun. And I kind of miss it. Another thing which I'm probably going to add in. Lifetime levels of strength, 5.25 plates on the hammer strength incline. I think I ran this up to like 5.5, which was quite cool. Fantastic visuals for myself there. Fantastic. 11.25 kilos. Lower back now rounding. Fantastic. Lovely stuff. Any changes in here? No. Already planning another prep. What date was this? 25th of April, about a month before prep started. Jesus Christ, Josh. Upper walkthrough. When I used to do voiceovers, because I was really cool. 220 RDL, so I now put in the RDL for obviously lower. I think I ran this up to like 260 for a set of 3 or 4. So technically my strongest ever hip hinge is an RDL, not a stiff leg, which is quite cool. Isolation work, a bit more information regarding that. This was quite cool, 100 kilos in both, 11th of May to the 2nd of May, so less than a year between these photos. It's quite sick. And this is, I think the last ped bump up. So this was where we ran testosterone to 500 milligrams and then mastron to 950. So just shy of 1.5 grams of gear. Rear shot actually looking half decent. Front double looking half decent. Looks a bit better on stage. Actually switching my quad on. I did it in off season, can't do it in prep. That makes no sense. And we also added in a bit more insulin, but this time it was Nova Rapid, so that's going to be fast acting insulin. We added this in pre-workout. I think eventually we did add this in post-workout in as well. So that was sound. I'm pretty sure there might be one more food bump up. This was 100 kilos. So solid, but by this point I was 100 kilos, like quite significant, quite easily, about 105 to 104, 100.5 to 100.4. Still fat, still pretty fat. Basically an arm day rundown. So at this point as well, I was doing an arm day basically whenever I could be asked, but usually it was on my Sunday rest day, where I would do, again, what you can see here. So it's basically a lateral raise to start off, and then basically 3 bicep movements, 3 tricep movements. So I went bicep, tricep, bicep, tricep, 2 to 3 sets on both on each exercise. Basically, not really logbooking it. It was on a rest day, so there was no changes to nutrition. It was basically I'd have a meal, I'd go and train, I'd have some mega pump and some salt, and sometimes malcarnitine as well. As you can see here, mega pump. And that would be additional bit of work for my arms, because my arms are a bit of a weak point. Definitely going to need a little bit more volume within this next off season. And then we have the lower B. Where are we now? End of the off season was basically back end of May, so I've got about another 2 weeks of pushing at this point. Performance obsessed, we're going to skip through that post for don't know what reason. Upper, so it's again towards the back end of the off season. I think this is when I was up in Manchester for the Fit Expo with Conte Sports. Yes, as you can see here, that trim is absolutely horrendous. Thank fuck I've grown it out a little bit. I should have been wearing beanies here, not now. Coming towards the end of the push-up post-prep. This was quite cool. 6.5 plates on a T-bar. And the execution isn't that shit. God, I miss doing shit like this. God, I'm fat. Yeah, 5.5 plates on the hammer strength incline. This was quite cool. Big Luke. And this was the end of the off season. So, totals, I think, yeah, food did get worked up to 850 carb, 60 fat, 285 protein. So it's basically an extra 50 grams of carbohydrates. Was there any changes? Yeah, so now I was trying to see where the extra 50 grams of carbs went. There we go. So meal 5, I had changed out to 200 grams of 5% beef mince and 1 packet of sticky rice. Again, when I'm running through food, I'll have like my whole sort of food log to the side or to the side here. Probably to the far left side of the screen. So you'll see like where my food sort of was at each sort of point. Non-train day was exactly the same. Like it was literally just 425 carb, 90 fat, and then 275 protein. Which was now I changed this out a little bit. So basically situating my carbs a bit more evenly throughout the day. This was 4 eggs, 2 bagels, meal 1. Meal 2 was 200 grams of chicken, 1 packet basmati rice, 10 grams of almond butter. Meal 3, 60 whey, 110 cream of rice, 25 dark chocolate, 100 grams of fruit. Meal 4, 200 grams of beef mince, 1 packet basmati rice, 5 mils of olive oil. Then meal 5 was 200 grams of chicken, 2 bagels, and 25 grams of dark chocolate. So that basically runs through my whole sort of off season. Now I've also got a few questions. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get up the questions in I say a little bit. It'll be in the next 10 seconds for you, and then run through them as well. Okay, so question 1: how do you get over the fear of fat gain holding you back, forcing you to pull back too quickly or not push hard enough? Now, this is something which I think a lot of people, even if they don't admit it, will struggle with. Like everyone within physique development, even within bodybuilding, whatever, is going to be to a certain level subconscious of the way that they look, whether that's dieting, whether that's pushing food, like, and it's something which, again, I think having a coach to remove that subjective nature and just be objective is very, very important. Obviously not everyone can afford a coach, but I do think it's something which you just do need to try your best to accept to some sort of degree. Like when you are eating more food than your body needs to survive, more than your maintenance, you're going to sometimes, not sometimes, you're going to add on additional sort of body fat. And that's again something where I think making sure that your rate of gain within a push isn't too excessive. I like somewhere between like a 0.2 to a 0.3 kilo per week. I think that works really, really well, unless you're in that sort of rebound phase, maybe after a prep, and you're also utilizing PDs where you can be a little bit more aggressive. And again, if someone's utilizing PDs, those things can be a little bit more sort of aggressive. But again, it's something where I'd be objective with things. How is your appetite? How is your training? Your training is always going to be the most important thing when it comes to an improvement phase. If your training is progressing, do you need more food? Probably not. If your training isn't progressing and your body weight also isn't going up, you probably do need more food. If it's a case where your body weight is going up, but your training isn't going up, your training numbers aren't going up, I should say, then it might be a case where you're just not that responsive to food at the moment. So that might be a case where you do need to pull back. But again, everyone is going to be a little bit different. From the PDs which you have used, which was the more beneficial or not beneficial for you? So again, I would say this is pretty much the same for anyone, really, in the sense that stick to what the vast majority of people tend to go for, in the sense of taking your testosterone to a place where it is your maximum tolerable dose. That is going to be something which is good for your DHT and your estrogen production. You want to be having testosterone within your cycle. I've seen a lot of people who will run oral only cycles because they don't want to inject, etc. But I would say stick to the basics, work up your testosterone, adding in a DHT derivative. I'm not a massive fan of a 90 nor within an off season because it can just plummet your appetite, and that's the main thing which you want to be utilizing is food. Food is going to be fueling our training. So I would say for me, a normal sort of test and master on sort of cycle works really well. I did find that within my off season, the introduction of insulin worked really well as well. So that could be something. Like I was always pretty full and ready to train. So that was useful for me. Not beneficial, potentially L-carnitine. I did actually pull it out because I wasn't really getting too much out of it. I do think it shines a little bit more within a diet because obviously it's going to be, let's say, transporting fatty acids to a better sort of degree. Again, it can have a benefit in terms of pumps and recovery, but for me, I didn't really see much of a point of it. If I was taking growth hormone within my off season, which I probably will during this next push after prep, might throw it in there because I can just put it in the same syringe, but L-carnitine, I can't really be bothered with. How did you manage getting in more food during your off season? So that's something which, again, I've basically covered. Going for low volume carbohydrate sources and just foods that I enjoyed. So whatever I was actually enjoying, I would just have more of. Sticky rice works really, really well. When times I was enjoying cream of rice and oats, I would have them because I was actually wanting to enjoy it. So again, going for low volume sort of food choices and foods that you enjoy, things like honey, things like jam, things like even squares bars, even though the fat content's going to be a little bit higher. If you can fit them in, they're low volume, they're going to be really easy to eat, and they're quite nice. How to not overthink what the scale says. This kind of goes in favor with the first question. Again, it takes time, but just reminding yourself that scale weight is going to increase as you have more food. So try not to stress about it too much. Again, if it's going up excessively, it might be a case where you're just in too much of a surplus. So it'll either be a case where you need to pull down on food, or potentially even just hold there for a little bit and just allow training performance to improve if it is improving. What is the importance of meal timings and what you eat? So again, meal timings, especially within an improvement phase, are very, very important in my opinion, because you want to be spacing out your meals so that you have enough time to actually digest that food. And also what you eat is again going to be important, because you don't want to just be having just the shittest forms of protein. You want to be having full proteins which digest well as well. So things like whey, things like chicken, things like beef mince, things like eggs, things like fish. I'm not a massive fan of fish myself, but it's a good form of protein. You want to be having whole foods within your diet, not just fucking Aldi protein yogurts. Even if they taste nice, maybe if like for lifestyle clients, I don't mind having them in, but for people who are looking to make the most improvements within their physique, always go for whole foods and just focus on that. Don't be drinking your food. When you're chewing food, you're going to be releasing digestive enzymes that actually help you digest that food. So making sure that you're sitting down with a meal, you're giving yourself time to eat that meal. Not maybe drinking water, like say 15 minutes prior to a meal, 15 minutes afterwards, going for a short walk after your meal to help digest that food as well. And again, especially when it comes to like a pre-workout setting, give yourself enough time to have that meal, because that's probably going to be one of your highest volume of, let's say, calories within that day. So giving yourself enough time to digest that food, I'd say about 60 to 90, maybe even 2 hours, 60 to 90 minutes, maybe even 2 hours before you go and train, just to make sure that that food is digesting well, so therefore you can perform to the best of your possible to the best possible degree within your training sessions. How to structure around your weaknesses. So adding volume, intensifiers, and session structure. So this is where you need to be objective within your physique and think, right, this is, I say objective, this is where I like running something like an upper lower split or a pull push legs, like the first training split I ran after prep, because it's very generic in the sense of your volume is going to be equally equated. So therefore, within that sort of first push, you can assess what body parts improve and grow off that baseline level of volume. So you might find, for example, myself, my quads grow a decent amount off a baseline level of volume. So therefore, I don't really need to specialize in them too much. However, my arms, my chest, my lats need a little bit more. So therefore, when I do increase my volume, when I can recover from more, I will place more volume on those areas. Again, things like intensifiers, I will usually tailor them towards isolation movements because they're not going to take away too much. And again, intensifiers are a very, very good way, in my opinion, to boost up your overall training volume without taking away too much. So adding things like rest pauses, adding things like drop sets. And then when it comes to session structure, again, this is going to be dependent on your weaknesses. So for example, if you have a weak pair of quads, doing them first while you're fresh, because you can get after it a bit more. if you have a weak pair of, let's say, adductors, like myself, doing them first because you're going to be fresh, you can get after them more. So again, it's going to depend on what your body needs, and how you would sort of set out your sessions is going to be based on what you actually need. How to plan out a long-term gaining phase, how to lay out a plan for a long-term gaining phase. So goals, learning from last time. So again, I think within any sort of phase that you go through, you pick up on little things which you could do differently. For example, I think when anyone diets, they focus on food a lot more. So they focus on what they could get in within an off season. So this prep, I've noticed that dates digest pretty well when I've had refeeds and carb ups and things like that. So that's probably something I'm going to add in when my food's pretty high. I'm going to add in them because it's going to be an easy source of carbohydrates. And again, when it comes to planning out a gaining phase, plan out how long you want to be gaining for. So for example, if you're knowing you're going to be going on holiday in June, July, when do you want to be dieting for that? So how long do you actually have to grow? If you're thinking about competing, how long do you have to before you next prep? For example, myself, I'm not going to be prepping next year. It will most likely be 2026 or 2027 when I'm at the level that I want to be. So therefore, I'm going to plan out most likely a pre-prep with about a year or so, maybe 9 months before, just to make sure that I'm in a leaner position to then go into a prep. So therefore, I'm going to plan out my plan between end of this prep towards that pre-prep. How long do I have in between? I'm probably not going to be, if I'm competing in 2027, I'm not going to be in a surplus for that long. So therefore, it'll be a case where I have one push, pull back a little bit, get myself a bit more hungry, get myself a bit more sensitive to food, and then push up from there. Then when it comes to the last question, exercise selection in off season in comparison to a prep. Now, in this sense, it doesn't really change too much. When you're in a prep, when your body fat levels are lesser, you're going to be not as stable. So therefore, now I don't really do any sort of free weight pressing because I can't stabilize the right amount of load. Like for example, I probably wouldn't be able to press a pair of 50 kilo dumbbells very well. Probably still could, but not to the same degree which I would be able to in an off season. So therefore, I would go for when you're in a prep, when you're in the latter end of a diet, opting for machine-based movements because they require a lot less stability. When you're in off season, you can still go for them. Of course, you're probably going to get more bang for your buck out of them. However, I do think that there's also merit to doing free weight movements a lot more, doing barbell hip hinges, because you can just stabilize that load, and there is merit to getting strong at the basic sort of movement. So in a sense, it doesn't really change too much, just being a bit more sort of selective when you're in the latter end of a diet, because that's when you're going to be having to get the most out of your sessions to a better sort of degree. So that is the last question I've got. Hopefully this video was not, I know it's going to be quite long, but hopefully it's been a case where people have taken some things from this and hopefully taken some things into their next off season, the next improvement phase, and they make the most progress possible. But again, as usual, if there's any questions, you feel free to drop me a message, feel free to drop a comment, feel free to drop me a message on Instagram, drop me a WhatsApp, whatever that really is. And as usual, any likes, shares, subscribes, story tags, all that jazz is greatly appreciated. And I'll hopefully catch you in the next one. Obviously, peak week starts from tomorrow. For myself, this video will be out within peak week. So I'm going to try and film some bits as well. Hopefully record some bits from the FitX show next week. And yeah, should be good. So I'll catch you in the next one.